Live on YouTube.
Yes, we are live on YouTube.
Yes. After 1 minute, Meenakshi ma'am, we can start now.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I trust all of you are safe and healthy along with your near and dear ones. I welcome one and all to this national webinar series on knowledge generation during the COVID-19 pandemic, Day 2, Session 5. This webinar series has been organized by the Bombay Teachers Training College in association with the Department of Education, University of Mumbai. We are joined by participants from across the country and some beyond its borders. Close to 3,700 registrations, an average of 1,000 participants viewing the sessions live, and over 5,000 views. We are really overwhelmed by your response. Our resource person is logged out and he's trying to log in again. This morning's session was conducted by Professor and Head of Department, Dr. Shefali Pandya, Department of Education, University of Mumbai, and was on the topic of tool development. The session explored the development of instruments for quantitative studies, types of validity, and types of reliability. The session explored the nuances of these concepts with the help of simple but meaningful illustrations. The session aligned with the overall theme of the webinar series, Knowledge Generation in Education During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Dr. Pandya also touched upon online data collection and online research. For those of you who would like to revisit the recording or may have missed out for some reason, it is available online on YouTube on the Bttc official channel. From the steady stream of feedback we received on the chat window, Dr. Pandya's session was highly appreciated by one and all. The session was moderated by Dr. Lubna Mansoori of Bombay Teachers Training College. The session ended with a question and answer session, which clarified the viewers' questions on related issues in research. The review of related literature is another important and key component of the research process. And to shed light and help us navigate this complex task, we have with us here Dr. Rajiv Indramani Jha. I'm pleased to introduce the audience to Dr. Jha. Dr. Rajiv Indramani Jha has carved a niche in the field of art, culture, and education as a scientific artist come an artistic teacher educator. Dr. Jha is a registered PhD guide in education with University of Mumbai and a co-guide with Sri JJT University, Rajasthan. He is an external referee for PhD dance and for Sangeetacharya Kathak dance in several universities. He is a trained teacher educator in cultural education by the Center for Cultural Resources and Training, CCRT, New Delhi. Dr. Jha has the distinction of being a double doctorate His first PhD is in dance, awarded by the Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya, Khyaragarh, Chhattisgarh. His second PhD is in education, awarded by the University of Mumbai. He has a master's degree in science and education, both from the University of Mumbai, and has qualified the state eligibility test for lecturership. Dr. Jha is a Sangeet Alankar in Kathak dance from Akhil Bharatiya Gandharva Mahavidyalaya Mandal. He has been trained in Kathak by eminent gurus such as legendary Padma Shri Natraj Pandit Gopi Krishna, Padma Shri Sangeetacharya, Dr. Puru Dadich, and Dr. Manjari Dio. He is a Visharad in Bharatnatyam dance, trained under Guru Ms. Madhuri Kelkar. In addition, he has been trained for 3 years in Odissi dance. Dr. Jha has been confirmed with the prestigious awards of Shringarmani by Sur Singar Samsad, Mumbai, as well as Vipra Gaurav by Maharashtra Vipra Mitra Mandal, Mumbai. He has been honored for his distinguished achievements by the Birla School, Lions Club, and Rotary Club. Dr. Jha has been an associate editor of 5 conference proceedings of national and international levels. He has successfully completed several funded research projects in education by the University of Mumbai. Dr. Jha has authored a research-based reference book in 2 volumes titled Kathak Dance Education, Contemporary Systems, Problems and Suggestions, published in 2015. The foreword has been written by Professor Manvi Singh, the Vice Chancellor of Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya. He has also co-authored a syllabus-based book in Hindi titled Kathak Shastra Darshan Bhag 8 of Akhil Bharatiya Gandharva Mahavidyalaya Mandal, 2018. Recently, he has authored a book titled Learning and Teaching, published by Himalaya Publishing House Private Limited in 2020. The profile and reviews of Dr. Jha's dance performances, have been published in leading newspapers across the country. He has been invited as a resource person and expert for diverse topics by several reputed institutions in the country. Dr. Jha was a member, Board of Studies, KJ Somaiya Comprehensive College of Education, Research and Training, Mumbai, and has also been an advisory member in the cultural field. At present, he works with Bombay Teachers Training College, Colaba as an associate professor. In his role as the IQAC coordinator from 2010 to 2019, he led the college twice to A grade by the NAC. Dr. Jha teaches courses such as science pedagogy, educational psychology, educational research methodology, and drama and art in education. His educational philosophy is Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. I welcome Dr. Jha. I wonder if he's back online or still disconnected.
He's with us, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, I'm there.
Welcome, Dr. Jha, and over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Minakshilat. At the outset, I want to ensure first that I am audible.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you. I would like to thank for this wonderful opportunity to the 2 institutions. First and foremost, the principal, Dr. Bhagwan Balani of Bombay Teachers Training College, and the vice principal, Dr. Mandeep Kocho, and the whole team of Bombay Teachers Training College, as well as the professor and head of Department of Education, Dr. Shefali Pandya and her team at the university for considering me for this opportunity. Thank you so much. This topic, review of related literature, is often an underestimated topic. However, the importance of this topic is immense. This can be viewed that this topic, though is a second, this continues from the beginning till the end. Even after the thesis has been submitted, the review of related literature never ends. May I request the technical team to put the slide, to share my slide?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So basically, review means looking again, having a look once more. Of what? It is reviewing the literature. In this case, the literature refers to the reports of stalwarts, of experts, those who have already conducted research. And we have to look at the literature or the report, the research work done by others in the field, which is related to our field of research. That means the literature that we are reviewing may not be same, identical with the topic of our research. However, it may be collateral. With this understanding in mind, let's begin with the review of related literature presentation for today. Next slide, please. So the outline of today's session consists of the meaning, the purpose, the steps involved, and the most important aspect, the structure. The meaning of literature review as given by different experts. It is a written summary of journal articles, books, and other documents that describes the past and current state of knowledge or information on the topic of your research study. So basically, it's a formal document, it's a written summary. And both the current state as well as the past state of the knowledge or information is evolved in this written summary. And this again just should be in relation to the topic of the research study that you have conducted or you're going to conduct. Another definition, a literature review is a written document that presents a logically argued case founded on a comprehensive understanding of the current state of knowledge about a topic of study. This case establishes a convincing thesis to answer the study's question. So once again, we find in this definition, it's a written document and there is a logical argument. A case is logically argued, which is based on the comprehensive understanding, a deep understanding of the state of affairs, the current state of knowledge about a topic, and thus the author, the researcher, the student tries to establish a convincing thesis to answer the study's question. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. A literature review is an objective, critical summary of published research literature relevant to a topic under consideration for research. Its purpose is to create familiarity with current thinking and research on a particular topic and may justify future research into a previously overlooked or understudied area. Once again, we find the terms which are important in this definition are objective, critical summary of published research literature, its relevance to the topic under consideration, and the purposes are many. One among them is to create familiarity with current thinking and to research on a topic, particular topic, and it should justify future research into previously overlooked or understudied areas. That means it is re-looking at related research studies done by experts in relation to the area of your research study. It may not be identical, however, it may be collateral. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, thank you. So we find only 3 definitions are given in this presentation, but there are many, many more. And we find that literature review is consisting of characteristics such as interpretation and synthesis. And in this task of literature review, active role of the writer, the researcher, is involved. It also deals with a project in its own right. Sometimes the literature review is written as a project in its own right. And it also involves a constant running through the whole project. That means literature review is not confined to the second chapter, usually in a thesis or in the report writing. It, in fact, is spread out and serves different purposes throughout the thesis, throughout the report, as the case may be, and serves different purposes. And hence, it's a constant running through the whole project. It is also the broadening of the review's scope. So with this understanding, we move forward. Next slide, please. This is very important, that there are many purposes of literature review which are cited, and we can analyze them in different manner. Once we understand the purpose of literature review, it will be easy for us, convenient for us, to do a literature review well. So we find, according to Bruce, the purposes could be divided into a process and or a product. So process and product form means in the process, the writer learns about the literature in the course of writing about it. Whereas in the product form, it plays a role in the thesis argument. Particularly in the process, it establishes the status quo, formulates a problem, defend the value of pursuing the line of inquiry, compare the findings and ideas of others with your own. Whereas the product purpose of a literature review involves synthesis of the work of others and demonstrates the accomplishment of the exploratory process. Next slide, please. Another way of looking at the purpose that a literature review serves is basic and advanced. When we say basic, it is to advance a position about the current existing state of knowledge on a topic. And this is done by summarizing and evaluating. Not to mention synthesizing. So summarizing, synthesizing, and evaluating the sources. The advanced purpose of a literature review is to uncover a research problem for further study. So it is based on the basic literature review and proposes a thesis. So once the basic purpose is served, one can move towards the advanced purpose of the literature review. Thus, we find the purpose of literature review could be to give an overview of the big issues, to select some of these for your study, to summarize other people's work, to evaluate other people's work, to provide a context for your work, to identify gaps, to develop an understanding of theory and method. Next slide, please. Once again, we can summarize the purpose of literature review. It is to find out what information already exists in your field of research because you don't want to do a research which others have already done, but you want to find out what others have done and to what extent. Identify gaps in the research so that your research can fit into that gap and serve a meaningful purpose. Find other people working in your field, because that helps you in collaboration and seeking help, support, and insights in your own field. Identify major seminal works, because that is the foundation of knowledge, and that is why a researcher should identify this aspect. Identify main methodologies and research techniques so that you are well equipped to carry on your own research. Identify main ideas, conclusions, and theories, and establish similarities and differences. This is an ongoing process of literature review, and with every source that you come across, you have to keep on identifying main ideas, conclude about them, the theories behind it, and establish similarities and differences between the sources. Provide a context for your own research, and that is why you are carrying out a literature review. So it provides the context and makes your own research meaningful in the eyes of the readers and in your own eyes. It also shows relationship between previous studies or theories. Next slide, please. Now, these are also some of the purposes which we have mentioned, not specifically earlier, but I would like to mention this and illustrate them in brief. So let us take one by one some of the purposes through illustration. Next slide. Define the terms is one of the purposes served by a literature review. So in this sample, which is illustrated on the slide, you can find that there are some underlines which tells us how this particular author or researcher has approached. Literature review helps the researcher in defining the terms. And for that, you, as Dr. Pandya has earlier mentioned in today's morning session, that you have to have a conceptual definition and then operational definition. So in the literature review, this process is being achieved. You survey what the experts have already written and in what perspective have they written. And then from there, you get a perspective, you get a context for carrying out your own research. So for example, in this, the author writes, some of the confusion may also exist. So don't go on the content of the write-up, just pay attention to the format, because we are here trying not to understand the content of the specific illustration, but through the aspects, we want to understand how a literature review should be written well and carried out. So some of the confusion, he starts with some confusion, and then he mentions that they address inquiry in several different contexts. And then the author mentions a particular meaning that, when not specified, may lead to misunderstanding. And then he mentions, here we define each term and its relationship to science education. So that is how you find that he has surveyed already, he came to a conclusion, he or she, the author, and came to a conclusion, and then is trying to clarify the terms. So defining of the terms is one of the most important purposes served by the literature review. Next slide, please. Hello. May we proceed to the next slide? Thank you. Second purpose is justify selection of the literature. Now, we cannot take each and every report or research study into consideration, and that may not always be necessary. So how to, whatever selection we have done, that should have some basis, and we should justify the selection so that when we are questioned about the selected literature in our review, we should have a logic behind it. So in this example, you find a review of the whole field. It starts with that and then mentions, acknowledges it's a formidable task. The subject means the topic has been active in a research sense for about 100 years, which usually is the case for many concepts. This review will therefore mainly highlight experimental research done. That means it is narrowing down that though the topic is very vast and for 100 years it is active, it has been active, the author here selects only that which pertains to a particular method. And here the author's decision is the experimental research. The author has inevitably missed some important works. That is another acknowledgement. The author apologizes in advance for seeming to ignore the work of some people while mentioning other contributions which it may be felt are of lesser importance. So in this way, we should be able to justify selection of the literature. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. The third purpose is justify omissions. In this example, it is mentioned as the purpose of this article, then the review was guided by which type of research. But then you find after that, the author is saying many of these articles were discarded because they were not empirical studies pertaining to inquiry, professional development for science teachers. To further narrow the scope of the review, we selected only empirical studies published subsequent to some report. That means it is very important, if you're not including some set of reports or literature, you should justify it. So justify the omissions. Rather than, because of this, we made the decision not to include these studies in this review. So at every point of the write-up, this is just a sample that I have taken to illustrate, but when you read such articles in the journals or you read the reports in the thesis, you will find that the authors, the researcher justifies any omissions made. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. The fourth purpose is forecast sections of review. That means the purpose here is to set boundaries explicitly. So for example, in this case, an author has mentioned this chapter concentrates on 1-2 aspects. And then he further elaborates the review in relation to those 2 aspects. So again, in that, the author has subdivisions, elaborations in the sub-themes. So we find 1A and similarly 1B, 1C, and then moving on to 2. And again in the second topic, 2A, 2B, and so on and so forth. One more thing here, the boundary is set that though the work has been selected, one of the work which the author has selected has a limited value, but because it is a longitudinal study, this particular author finds it useful, so he has taken that. So this type of language and an argument has to be developed in the writing of the literature review. Next slide. Thank you. The fifth aspect, the purpose is signal structure. That means in your writing of the review of related literature, you may signal the structure of your write-up. The most popular one is the chronological signaling. And this example tells about it. Historical connection of health and physical education. So traditionally, what has been the case, and you cite the appropriate references. At the start of the 20th century, once again, you then from tradition, you move towards a little later, 20th century, and then you talk about the first syllabus appeared. So this is how you have to transition chronologically the write-up, the review of the related literature in the chapter or in the article. Next slide. Thank you. Next purpose is link your work to the literature. The work that you are proposing or you are going to take up has to be linked with the existing literature. So you can begin and you can mention what the influential writers on the subject have or are. And then you can then probably point out that there is a dearth of recent publications. So perhaps the stance has some validity. So then you can mention the aim of the study is not to contest this view, rather it is the intention to maintain that it is justification. If justification does exist, it is limited to secondary and not the primary sector. That means you're narrowing down, you're basing your work is based on the previous work, and you've identified what is prevalent, what is not, and thereby you come to that aspect where you can contribute. So link your work to the literature. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. The next purpose is critique the literature. That means you have to highlight the limitations of existing work, but you should not demolish it. As a reviewer, it's not my job to demolish the work of others, but that scientific attitude should be there, that I have to bring forth what were the limitations in the study, what could have been done better. However, I don't have the right, and it is against one's dignity to demolish the work. So be very careful in doing so. An example here is the author discusses various literature, but this particular literature he mentions, or he or she, the author mentions, the main limitation of the study was something, and moreover, the analysis could have been explained. That means the author is suggesting that probably this could have been done to make it a better and more effective study. And but also on the subsets of questions. So this is a reflection, this is the insight that you gain when you review a literature and you come to know what was lacking, what was the limitation, and what could have been done better. Next slide. Thank you. I hope this is the last purpose which I'm going to illustrate. So this is define the gap. And that is the most important aspect of a literature review. We have to define the gap in the research studies, what exists and what is current, and what you are supposed to take up or what you have taken up. So why have you taken up, or why you intend to take that up? And that gap should be your strength. And that can be brought out by a structure, something of this sort, where you mention the main conclusion that you draw, that is towards the end of the write-up normally. And that is the main conclusion that is drawn from the literature, is that previous studies focused on something, A, B, C, while the literature review identified one particular study in this regard. But to the best of my knowledge, no previous study have been evaluating what a relationship between C and D, for example, or another conclusion that can be drawn from the literature review is something else. So basically, in such way, in such a manner, with such a language and with such a linking of ideas and reviewing the ideas, you convince the readers that yes, this gap is existing and the research that you are taking up promises, commits to fulfill that gap. That is the significance, that is the justification of your work. So therefore, the research study presented in this paper focuses on, and the research study takes into account some of the limitations identified for previous studies. That means you have gained from the research studies. It's not just you have mentioned about the limitations, but you have taken from the limitations, you have gained insight, and now you are putting that into your own research so that your research is a better study and fits the gap well. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Very important, whenever we cite literature, we should write the source, and that is why a very simple strategy is use the name, date, and verb. So you can find that in the literature, just don't go on saying mentions or said or says. In fact, an author 1999 argues for, another author 1999 argues for or identifies, another author 1991 proposes, and so on and forth. So the verb that is associated speaks volumes about what you have analyzed, how you are reflecting, what you have understood about the review that you have studied. Next slide, please. So after having done this, it is probably, yes, I understand what is the meaning of literature review and what purposes it serves, how it is significant to my research study, but I can't find anything on my topic. How should I go ahead? So let me now guide you briefly. How can we proceed with the literature review? The famous 5 steps of literature review. Next slide. Next slide. So these are the 5 steps. Identify the key terms to use in your search for literature. That is the first step. Second is locate the literature about a topic by consulting several types of materials and databases, including those available at an academic library and on the internet. Third step is critically evaluate and select the literature for your review. Fourth step is organize the literature you have selected by abstracting or taking notes on the literature and developing a visual diagram of it. Fifth step is write a literature review that reports summaries of the literature for inclusion in your research report. Next step, next slide. So now, having said this, it doesn't clarify how should we go ahead. So let us understand these steps a bit in detail. The first step mentioned is identify key terms. And this is very important because if the first step is right, then only the other steps will help you and can develop well. If the first step is not right, probably it may land up with a disaster. So identify the key terms. My suggestion would be write a preliminary working title for a project and select 2 or 3 words that capture the central idea. For doing so, pose a short general research question. Use words that authors report in the literature and not which you like. So do some, before posing this, before coming up with a working title, just glance through, just read through some related literature article. You will get some idea, and then with that, you can start with a working title. Look in a catalog of terms to find words that match your topic. So for example, a working title could be weapon possession by high school students. You can go on any search engine, research search engine or a website, and for example, the ERIC website, and enter weapon possession in the search terms. you will find a lot of search results showing in the website, but all of them may not be pertaining to the research study, to the area in which you are studying. So to narrow it down, it is better to put high school students, or you can search for specific results which are dealing with the high school students to provide more targeted references. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So this is, I hope it is visible to some extent. This is the screenshot of Eric when you put only weapon position. So you can find here, it is showing many search results, and all of them are not related with the school. Next slide. In the next slide, when you go and you put weapon position and high school students, you find there are more specific, more targeted search results. Now, in the earlier slide, you might have noticed it showed around 87 search results. However, when you have narrowed it down, it is now showing you around 28 results, which are more specific and relevant to your area of study. Next slide, please. So you must have noticed that I have used Boolean Search, universal tool for online searching, and the Boolean search term was and. When I used the word and, it showed me results which had both weapon possession as well as high school students in the study. So Boolean search is a type of search allowing users to combine keywords with operators or modifiers such as and, not, and, or to further produce more relevant results. These operators develop the basis of logic database and mathematical sets. These operators connect your search words and either narrow down or broaden the results as per your wish. Note that and not or and or will generally need to be in uppercase or capital letters when used as a search operator. So you don't put A and D in small letters, but you have to put it in the capitals or the uppercase. Next slide. So we find when we use and, it actually limits the results. In my case, it was weapon possession and high school students. If you use or, it is one term or the other. Suppose if I put weapon possession or high school student, so it will give results either of weapon possession studies dealing with that only, or with the high school students. You can use a minus sign or not to exclude a term from the search, or you can put a minus in cite. That means excludes a website from the search if you don't want to have any websites coming up in the search results. You can use approximate sign for synonyms of the term. You can use inverted commas for exact phrase. Next slide. Thank you. For quotes, you can use the search, you can put the quotes for the exact phrase. For example, if I want to know network administrator, so I put that into the inverted commas, double inverted quotes. That means it will search only for that particular exact phrase. Parentheses can be used. Modifiers can be combined to create a more advanced or complex search. For example, I want to know network and administrator or architect. So this type of combinations can be used. And means it includes two search terms. The example could be network and administrator, or broaden your search with multiple terms. Example, network administrator or network manager. Not is used to exclude a specific term. Example, administrator, not manager. So as per your need to review, you can use these Boolean search terms, and you can use these universal tools for online search in almost all the search engines and websites. Next slide. You can also search for a phrase. For example, if you use double quotes, then it will search for fuzzy phrases. We'll search for both singular and plurals. For example, if I put heart attack in double quotes, it will find heart attack as well as it will find heart attacks, the plural, both. You can use curly brackets. This will search for specific phrase. So heart attack put in curly brackets will search only for heart attack, but not for the plural. Wildcards, for example, asterisk replaces characters. So if I use edu, edu with an asterisk, it will search for education, educational, educate, educator, educating, and so on. It can also include foreign language words if the website or the search engine provides it. So edu, and you can see these are some terms which are not English terms, but if I restrict it with English to the language English, still you will find that the wildcard replaces characters and so many words can be searched. Next slide, please. So to be smart, you can use these strategies. However, there are some more tips from my side. You can define your search question or topic. Why? Because understanding your topic before you dive into searching database keeps you focused on your topic and less likely to get sidetracked by irrelevant material. Second tip, break it down. Pick out the core concepts, usually nouns or noun phrases. So the tip could be you want between 2 to 3 keywords, not more. Tip could be avoid fluff words like mostly we have in our titles impact or effect. So why? Why should we not search with these words, impact or effect type of fluff words? Because words such as impact are used all the time. So you're more likely to get results that aren't relevant to your topic. And the third tip is identify 1 or 2 synonyms for each core concept. Why? Because computers aren't that smart. Yes, they are very efficient, but they are not smart, not smarter than you. They won't do any interpretation for you, which means they will spit out only what you put in. So at times you may have to change your words. So instead of students, you put children. Instead of children, you put students and see the effect. See the change in the search results that come up. Next slide, please. With identifying the keywords, we move towards the next step. With this, we can move towards the higher step, and that is locate the literature. And I think this again is a very cumbersome job for any novice researcher or author, and this remains so even for the advanced learners. For locating the literature, we need to use academic libraries. Both primary as well as secondary sources search different types of literature. So we can start with broad issues and background. Then we can move towards themes of our research, and then to those literature or sources of literature which have direct relevance. This is nothing but known as the convergent strategy. So that means we start with something which is distantly related to our work. We move steadily closer to what we are looking for, and which is directly matching to our work, and then finally we reach where to a point where research that is particularly pertinent to our work. Or in other words, I can say we begin with a background, more to do with your topic area rather than the research question, and we narrow the categories as we proceed doing the review, doing the survey. You may deal with sources in more detail, and finally you reach a stage where categories close to your research are dealt with. So you can then will be in a position to look at the papers in detail. Next slide. So in this stage, in locating the literature, we have from one spectrum early stage literature, and on the other spectrum we have summaries. Early stage literature means the papers posted on websites, professional association, newsletters, drafts of papers for conference proceedings, and so on. Index publications involve conference papers, dissertations, thesis, professional association papers, college and university publications. Journals or periodicals and electronic journals include refereed and non-refereed, international, national, regional, state level journals. Books includes research studies, essays. Summaries includes encyclopedias, research reviews, handbooks, abstracts, dictionaries, and glossaries of terms and statistical indexes. Next slide depicts visually the importance or the hierarchy of these material. On one hand, we find if we move towards apex, the ideas appear first, and we move towards the bottom of the hierarchy, we find ideas appear more than 10 years after initiation. On one hand, we find there are low standards to ensure quality, and on the other hand, we find there are high standards to ensure quality. Next slide, please. There are various popular databases. Not all of them cater to education. They cater to different subjects, and many of them do cater to social sciences, including education. Next slide. So major databases that you find are subscription-based or free databases. Under subscription-based, also you find many, and under major databases free, also you find many. In the slide, those which cater to social sciences are marked as SS. Next slide. So Indian databases, we find Shodh Gangotri, Shodh Ganga, eShodh Sindhu, IndCat, Vidwan, Information and Library Network InflipNet Center, ICSSR Data Service, which includes a collaboration with National Sample Survey, NSS, and Annual Survey of Industries, ASI datasets, which again are in turn handed over to InflipNet. So Shodh Gangotri is a repository of electronic version of approved synopsis linked to full text available in Shodh Ganga, whereas Shodh Ganga is a reservoir of Indian thesis plagiarism-free content, or Kund. eShodh Sindhu is a consortium for higher education, electronics resources, and initiative by MHRD, whereas IndCat is unified online catalogs of books, theses, and journals. Vidwan is a premier database of profiles of scientists and researchers and other faculty members. InflipNet Center is Information and Library Network. It is an autonomous inter-university center founded by UGC. ICSSR Data Service, setting up of Indian Social Science Database Repository for the ICSSR's data service. ICSSR signed a Memorandum of Understanding with Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, New Delhi, for providing National Sample Survey and Annual Survey of Industries, which in turn are being handed over to InflipNet Center for hosting onto the repository. Next slide. Thank you. This is a screenshot of ANLIST. And as teachers, we are lucky to have ANLIST with institutional login so that we can have access to an ocean of literature relevant to so many fields provided by so many sources. Next slide. For ANLIST, you need to have an institutional login ID. This is Shodh Ganga, and this is the reservoir for the thesis, and this is being upgraded updated continuously, it's a boon for those who want to refer to what work has been done and what work are recently done. So with respect to the thesis work done in India. Next slide. Google Scholar is an online search tool, very important. Don't go on Google, go on Google Scholar if you want to refer good articles, good research papers, and views of experts. So in this, you can find that there are triple lines on the left side, which can be used to give detailing to what type of search you want. On one side, you find that when you search, you find there are any time. That means it tells you the date, the custom range within which you want to find the search. You find the studies that are listed, and you also find, very important, there is a double quotation mark. Say if you find a search result, there is a double quotation mark, and if you click on it, you will find that it gives you the citation in MLA, APA, Chicago, Harvard, and Vancouver styles. And this is very important because as researchers, it makes our task very easy. We can just copy the citation in that particular format and add it in our document. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is Google Scholar, highlighting the details. I wanted to give you a small glimpse of Mendeley. No, go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. I wanted to give you a small glimpse of Mendeley. Basically, it's a free reference management software. And this is a very handy tool for researchers nowadays. Gone are the days when we had to write everything, maintain files, and it was a tedious job to take the references from one format to other, to add, to delete. And then the computers came, it made our work easy, and the Word document. However, this has made it even more easier because now on the mobile, on any device, and on the internet, I can sync it with my account, and once synced it, I can have the references at my fingertips, and I can insert it in the document with various styles, more than 5 styles of citation, and various documents can be saved. It gives you around 2 GB of free space, and you can also, if you require more, you can go for a higher version, you can pay. And it's a wonderful citation management software. Next slide, please. Zotero was the software with which I actually began using online referencing. It is an open reference management software, and it also has very good features in comparison to Mendeley, but it doesn't save the PDF, saves the PDF format. In short, there are some differences between Mendeley and Zotero, but any of the two is good enough, and it depends on your choice which one you want to take up. The files, once saved, can be exported and imported from one another. Next slide, please. So this slide, I think, is a reflection on the advantages and the disadvantages on using internet as a resource for literature review. I will skip this. Dr. Pandya also did mention, not in this sense, but she did mention about online research in her session. And I think it is up to us to analyze what are the limitations as well as what are the advantages of online media for various purposes of research, and then we can accordingly take steps to proceed with it. Next slide. This is very important because we want to know the credibility of the material. So which journal, which article, which website or a search engine is good enough to give me good material. So in that case, if your study is reported in an online journal, please see whether it has a peer review board. Determine if you recognize the authors. You might come to know of authors if you have been doing the review study or survey who have published in quality journals or books. If the website has standards of accepting the research studies, study those standards. Ask a faculty member if he or she feels that the article is of sufficient quality to be included in your literature. At this point of time, at this point of presentation, I would like to mention that never feel shy to ask your colleagues, fellow classmates, and most importantly, your supervisor, your teacher, or the mentor, because the experience survey which they can give you can no one else can give. It is often felt that even even with best of the tools available to you, the insight that the experience of a person, a mentor, or an expert gives you is far more than what you will gain through your own study. So do give weightage to experience survey. Next slide. Now the third step is to critically evaluate and select the literature. This is very important, and we will do it in two ways. First, is it a good, accurate source? And second, is it relevant? So is it a good, accurate source? Rely as much as possible on journal articles published in national journals. Of course, having said that, please remember, these are just guidelines. They cannot ensure the quality. So these are some of the guidelines which probably will help you in judging the quality. Use a priority system for searching the literature. Look for research studies to include in your literature review. Research studies, not conceptual papers, or papers which are just like an essays. Include both quantitative and qualitative research studies in your review, even though your research may be based on quantitative or qualitative or mixed. But in the review, include all types of research studies related to your topic or your area. Second aspect is it relevant? So consider topic relevance, individual as well as site relevance, problem and question relevance, accessibility relevance, and so on and so forth. Next slide. Very important, how to organize the literature. So here I will tell you about the three aspects of organizing the literature. Reproducing, downloading, and filing is the first and important step. Second is taking notes and abstracting studies. And third is constructing a literature map. In reproducing, downloading, and filing, I think the online reference management tools would be a boon for us. So make copies of the articles, scan the articles, download, place the articles in the folders, probably alphabetized by author name, alternatively organized by sources, topic, or keywords. Copyright laws restrict copying, so that probably is a hit even with the online reference management tools such as Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote, and so on. But this is applicable for manual as well as for online reference management. Second, taking notes and abstracting studies. In this, the questions being addressed, data collection, and major results should be taken into consideration. Abstract is systematically record information about each source. Write your own abstract and not that used in the journals. So don't take ready-made abstract. That is written for their purpose. For your purpose, you have to devise your own abstract. Research problem, research questions, hypothesis, data collection procedure, results of the study and findings are main aspects that should be included in your review, in your abstract. The third aspect is constructing a literature map, because a visual diagram speaks volumes about what is there in your mind. So literally, the visual or diagram picture map of the literature that you have found, you have to make this. It is not to be taken from somewhere. A communication device for self as well as the audience, the readers of your research or review. And it could be in various forms, for example, chart, circular. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, here one example is given. You cannot read it, never mind, but just keep in mind such a tabular organization is also very handy way, wherein personal learning environment can be dealt with definition, pedagogies or principles involved, and then in each of the columns the studies that you have taken, the authors that who have, those who have dealt with it, the abstract, you can crystallize the definition in, and you can have a comparative view with respect to definitions. What are the views of different authors with respect to the principles of personal learning environment or any other topic? What are the different views, or what they have quoted or what they have found out? Next slide. So you can go to rationale, you can go to the skills required, the processes involved, and so on and so forth. So a very long but comprehensive detailed table can be created to give you an idea about what is going on. Next. This is important. Next slide. There are various ways in you have to write. So summary, paraphrase, quotation, plagiarism. And plagiarism is not citing, not giving the credit to the original source. However, summary can be summary is an accepted form. Paraphrasing is also accepted, but that means translating the sources, the sentences in your own words. And quotation means you put it in inverted commas, but in all these three cases, whether you summarize, paraphrase, or quotation, you use the quotation, you have to give the reference and avoid plagiarism. Next slide. Quotation means you should have a statement introducing the quotation, then the quotation, and then followed by the explanation why you are having it. So it should be justified. It shouldn't be just to make the volume of your review of related literature. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. This I've covered in some way, so I will be showing it visually. Okay, so the literature map could be hierarchical. For example, in this case, you find that the various studies are linked with the concepts and their authors and the year and their findings. Next slide. It could be circular in this form. So there is no hard and fast rule. How should be your literature map? That all depends on your conceptualizing, visualization of what you have found out and how you want to convey it to the reader in the best form. However, somewhere in the diagram, you should point out where you stand. Next slide. This is another way. Just see the format. You don't have to read the material. It is just the various formats which can be used to show depict in a diagrammatic manner. Next slide. And next slide. Next slide. Yes, this is the umbrella way. You have a larger, broader term followed by the narrower concepts. And the last part, the fifth step, write a literature review. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide. Okay, in this we have two aspects: using an appropriate style, employing specific writing strategies. So using an appropriate style includes within text references, end of text references, and levels of headings. Now remember, since this is a style of writing, you have to consider your university, or if you're submitting a research article or a paper for publication, then the publisher's mandated style you have to keep in mind, and you have to conform to that particular style. So it could be an American Psychological Association style, or the Chicago style, or the MLA style, and these are all complex. You have to refer, you can take help of Mendeley, and you can take up citations which are already given on the online management tools. However, you have to ensure whether it is conforming to that particular style or not by referring to the authorized manual published by the style manuals. The second aspect is employing specific writing strategies. So in this, first aspect is extent of the review. One question I just saw popped up here: how long, how many studies we should include? So let me give the answer, because we have reached that particular point. How long should be the researcher review? how far back in the literature do the references need to go? There is no hard and fast rule for it. However, for a journal article, the research review is shorter as compared to a thesis or a report. For a thesis and a report, you have to really establish in a very comprehensive manner. Whereas in a policy document or a proposal when you give, it can be a shorter one. Secondly, keep the principles that we already discussed earlier. The principles that uh, when you adhere to will guide you in writing your literature review to serve the purpose of writing the review. It shouldn't be just the volume. Volume is never the purpose of writing a literature review. You have to justify the purpose of literature review is to justify the research gap and to tell the readers why your research study is significant. The second aspect is types of literature reviews. It could be thematic or it could be study by study. And the third is concluding statement of the review, which summarizes the major themes, establishes the rationale and importance. May I now request the technical team to show, with respect to writing a literature review, a video which will tell you in detail with illustration how to write the literature review with illustrations.
Hello everyone. In writing the review of related literature, the structure plays a vital role. This presentation aims to discuss and present some steps and tips for writing the structure well. Step 1 is identifying incorrect approaches. Most students correctly begin with an introduction where they might discuss their overall purpose, hypothesis, and so forth. But then they will begin the first paragraph with author 1 says that. Then the next paragraph they will say author 2 says this, making each paragraph about a separate author. Notice that we are not connecting the authors in any way. Students will continue this until they run out of sources. This isn't what you are expected to do. Not only does this structure make it difficult to read, it also makes it very difficult for you to write. Step 2 is visual representation of theme creation. This big bubble is a visual representation of all of the relevant literature on your topic. Anything and everything, including research on the topic itself, or even maybe a theory that is somehow connected. The size of the bubble is determined by your topic. Some broader topics have larger bubbles. Now, assume that as we are reading this material, we begin to see certain patterns or themes. We start to see that different authors begin discussing the same things. Those things might be a definition of an abstract term, a methodology, an interaction between certain variables, or a disagreement. As the reader, we can begin to categorize our sources by those themes, breaking the bubble into several smaller bubbles, each of which address a topic within the literature review. Notice how this step has you organize the information into more understandable chunks. This is what your literature review is trying to do. Another way to look at this is to imagine a series of buckets, with each bucket representing a cluster or theme we start noticing in the literature. As we collect more sources, we can place them into their respective themed buckets. Step 3, the theme-based literature review. And this visual depicts the same. Now that we have our themes, we can begin to organize our paper in such a way that it is idea driven as opposed to author driven, or a series of unrelated separate statements, one for each author. In this diagram, we create a label for each theme. This is a bubble or bucket and make it a subheading. Then we will put all of our authors that have discussed this theme underneath that subheading. Now, instead of focusing on a single author and what they said, we now organize the authors by idea. They are not discussed separately. Rather, we will write the literature review like a discussion. Once we have finished one conversation, say theme 1, we are ready to move on to the next theme following the same process. Remember, there is no magic number to the themes. That depends on the topic and the number of resources you have. Step 4 is an example from the discipline of education. Let's focus on the structure, not the content. Notice the use of subheadings in this literature. Let's identify the themes the author deemed important with this particular topic. The first theme deals with the meaning of charter school. Before the author discusses anything regarding a charter school, it's important to discuss what we actually mean by a charter school. So, in this write-up, the author divides the paragraphs into 4 topics. The first, obviously, is the meaning of charter school and its characteristics, wherein he also mentions the origin of issues in the initial paragraphs. Next, we find that the theme begins with the sentence, "This article addresses those challenges, both operational and organizational, wherein the author discusses the literature concerning these challenges, with each of the 2 challenges so identified having 3 subheadings." So next we find that the author is dealing with the 2 challenges and its sub-themes or subheadings. Operational challenges is divided into 3 points or themes: philosophical conflict, poor relationships with the local district, inadequate funding. Organizational challenges is again divided into 3 sub-themes: structural issues, lack of expertise to provide services, ineffective role of the administrators. So, our paragraphs in literature reviews should be idea or topic driven as opposed to author driven. Thus, in this way, we find that the author is experiencing what writing instructors call the Burkean parlor metaphor, which argues that you are joining a conversation that began way before your time. It's like an unending conversation. Imagine that you walk into this parlor just trying to get a feel of what's being said. At this point, you are listening to certain tables in that parlor, noticing how the people sitting at the "what is the charter school" and "what are the challenges of charter schools" tables are having a debate. These authors, although sometimes separated by 50 or more years, are having a conversation through time. In the literature review, it is your task to help me, the reader, understand what's being discussed at all of those tables. What did you hear? What did they discuss? What conclusions can you make about those topics? Now I move towards some tips for the structure for writing a review of related literature. We can use the mind maps for planning purposes. Mind maps are a visual map to link and organize key concepts of your research. They also show links and relationships between ideas. In the given mind map on the slide, we find motivation is linked to definitions, rewards, internal forces, autonomy, self-control, self-motivation, theories, and then each of these are again linked to sub-themes or sub-points within them. Tips for structure includes tips for writing introduction. Introduction is very important because it sets the pace of your literature review. An introduction must tell the reader the following: what you are going to cover in the review, the scope of your research, how the review ties in with your own research topic. You can see on the slide, different colors are used to depict the role played by introduction. In the pink, we find topic sentence, which identifies 5 major themes as the scope of this review. In green, we find the 5 major themes to be covered. And lastly, in the orange font, we find concluding sentences, which are nothing but specific focus of the literature review. To develop an integrated argument from multiple sources, you need to link your arguments together. How this is done is illustrated on the slide. The topic sentence outlines your main claim or key point for that paragraph, depicted in orange. Then your supporting evidences are quoted, are mentioned from the readings that you have done. So we find the first one given in blue and the second one given in green, and that is a contrasting theory from research. So we can have contrasting theories as well as in the review to develop the argument. Lastly, in the pink, we find the concluding sentence which links this particular theme or idea to the next paragraph. Further, it is important to integrate your analysis and interpretation of the literature in your literature review. Read the paragraph and see how the arguments have been integrated into the paragraph along with student analysis. Analysis is not just student opinion, it needs to be supported by literature. So in this example, we find the topic sentence outlines the main claim or the key point for that paragraph, and that is given in orange color. The first statement of evidence from the literature is in blue color. Notice how the authors and the year of the study is mentioned, is cited. Then we find in the green a second statement of evidence from the literature. Then we have in the pink the student analysis, and this is the most important part of writing a review of related literature. Very important part of the structure. And the last is the concluding statement, wherein the focus is once again specified for that particular paragraph. We can also use linking and reporting verbs to make the structure meaningful and effective for the readers. In the given example, we see some reporting verbs that are mentioned: argue that, focused on, outlined by, suggest that. And some reporting verbs are also mentioned, some linking verbs are also mentioned, similarly, however, but. So we find the use of linking and reporting verbs make your writing meaningful and interesting for the readers. The literature reviews generally move from general to more specific, taking in all the elements mentioned previously. It is just like a convergence strategy. Build your story by identifying areas of consensus and areas of divergence. For example, it seems there is agreement among researchers. Much debate exists on the issue of, and so on and so forth. Possible structures of the literature review could be distant to close, the most distantly related to your work leading to the most closely related to your work. Chronological, which is earliest related work to most recent related work. Compare and contrast valid approaches, features, characteristics, theories, that is, one approach, then a second approach, followed by a third approach. Finally, consider the use of summary paragraphs throughout the body of the review. For example, in summary, the evidence presented demonstrates that. Rather, this literature supports the theory that. Consequently, the population studied may experience. However, alternative ideas and findings suggest. So, dear friends, I think this presentation would help you in making your structure better and effective in writing the review of related literature. Thank you.
Meenakshi ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Would you like to show the remaining slides, or shall we take in some questions now?
Actually, I've done the presentation, so you can take questions now.
Right. So we have a number of questions from our participants. The first question: are blogs written by people considered as authentic to use for research as reference source?
Okay. Uh, so,
Sir, I hope you can hear me.
yeah, I can hear you. Let me answer the question. Basically, blogs could be authentic if your purpose of the study, research study, is to research about the blogs. Otherwise, if your purpose is not to research the blogs, blogs may not be authentic sources for because these are general writers
I
by.
think you're not audible.
Rajesh sir, please check your audio connection. It is not coming clear.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible now. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, you're audible now.
Okay, thank you. So if the purpose of my research is to study blogs, then definitely blogs would be the material which I will have to survey. But if my purpose is not to study blogs, blogs often are informal and hence cannot be and are not published and hence cannot be considered to be sources for literature review.
Right. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Another question: how can you check for plagiarism easily?
Okay, there are various online plagiarism tools which give a limited access to check matter. So you can have, for example, some matter posted in the tool, and again and again you keep on posting, and it will give you a report. But there are also paid versions for plagiarism checking, and that can be done easily nowadays in the age of online technology.
Right, sir. So paid versions also available. And another question we have is how to check the credibility of online literature?
This answer I've already given in my presentation,
Yes.
and there is no one way to check the credibility. However, as I mentioned in my presentation, just because it is an international journal or it is a journal with ISSN or it is mentioned that it is a refereed or a peer-reviewed journal doesn't serve the purpose. You need to know what some issues, previous issues, and the current status of the journal. You see the authors, you take the advice of your supervisor and different colleagues and go through the articles, see the standard of publication, what they advise for submission, how long they take, what procedures they follow, and in many ways you can then judge that this journal is a good journal or not. Besides, of course, the index or the metrics that are associated with the journals.
Yes. Another person has asked, how many literature reviews should be done?
Pardon?
How many literature reviews should be done?
Okay, ma'am. So this is a very difficult question, and often when we are new to the field, we don't know. We feel that it should be 30 pages, 40 pages, 50 pages, 2 pages, or the number of references. Basically, a literature review should serve the purpose of doing so. It should look at what others have done and should help you in identifying the gap and how from there you derive the elements of your own research, your methodology, your topic, your scope, your what you would be excluding, what you will be including, and why you should be doing so. So if this is getting served, that long should be your research, literature review. Having said this, the journals, when you write articles, they are shorter in scope, and hence they have, and also they have various restrictions for the article length, and there it can be shorter. However, in a thesis or the reports that we send, there it can be elaborate. So there is no one answer that these many numbers or these many pages should be the ideal consideration for a review of related literature. But in a thesis, it may go to 30, 40, 50 pages, depending upon the topic and, of course, the university.
Yes. And we have another question. Is it compulsory to translate the literature review in other language while writing thesis?
Okay, that's a good question, I think. Because when we say that your literature review should be versatile, it means that if on a particular topic, if I get some material in some other language which is relevant and very pertinent to my present study, I should get access to it and I should quote it in my report. So the same funda is also applicable when I am writing in some other language other than English. So literature review is basically a communication between you and the reader, that this is what has been done, this is what are the limitations, this is what is not done, this is the research gap, and this is why I am taking up this research. So this communication, entire communication, should be understandable to the person who's reading your report. And in that case, if the reviews are in some other language and your report is in a particular language, you need to translate the reviews and quote it, and you make up your write-up of the literature review.
Right, sir. A good point there. And one final question, I think.
Yes.
What is the best method for citations?
Well, what I interpret is best method. One is the style of citation. So style depends on the recommended style by the publisher and or the university, as the case may be. The second could be that you can use reference management tools to cite the various and to choose and contrast with the citations. So the best method is a method which conforms to the norms in which you are submitting your research article or the report.
Right. So I hope that has answered the participant.
I too hope that I have satisfied the queries.
And are there any other questions from the other participants on Zoom? No, I think that's it.
Rajesh sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, your presentation was very, very comprehensive.
Thank you, sir.
And you have tried your level best to incorporate all the elements into that. As far as
I
educational,
would have liked to demonstrate Mendeley
yes.
for the audience, but because the technology didn't support, I had to come on mobile, and hence I'm not in a position to do so.
No, sir. I'm not talking about it. But you had done a wonderful job. You tried
Yes,
your level best to incorporate all the aspects, as well as you came up with a video also, which you had prepared very nicely. So my question is that as far as the educational research is concerned and review of literature is concerned, a lot of information is available online, and people are referencing, doing a lot of reference online, and then the same material is we can say quoted in their research papers. And how to cope up with we can say very good literature review where plagiarism is minimum. How we can ensure that? Can you give some tips on that?
Okay, sir. It's a good question, and it is something which plagues the present generation. Gone are the days when we were doing it manually and going from physical library to library. Um, However, this online technology has made it so easy that we seldom realize, like, we are taking up matter as it is, and we are not analyzing or reflecting on how are we writing and structuring the literature review. So one thing definitely is that we should, after reading, we should just close the book or the website from where we have read, and now what have we understood, we should write it in our own words. So that is known as paraphrasing. If there is a requirement of quoting some phrases, some sentence which you feel is very important, then we can use the strategy of quotes, double quotes. In other ways, we can summarize whatever has been mentioned in a particular research theory paper or article. So these are some ways in which you can avoid plagiarism at the first instance. There is no question of plagiarism then. The question of plagiarism comes when we cut, copy, paste, or we copy paste the matter from websites, and we don't give, even though we give citation, we don't reflect on it. So my gurus in research advise me that you should start with writing in your own words. So just close the book or the source which you have referred, and just whatever you have understood, that you write in your own words. And that the first step, if it is put in place, that avoids plagiarism in the first place. However, after doing all the things, again we can use various plagiarism tools online, freely available, but they have restrictions, but we can overcome that with smartness. And second is we can subscribe to the institutional or a paid version of plagiarism software and get it checked, so that we are at the content that our work is original and is not plagiarized. Thank you. I hope I have answered your query.
Thank you, Rajesh sir. Over to Meenakshi ma'am.
Thank you so much. I think that was a very comprehensive answer, as well as a very comprehensive overview of the whole process of the review of literature.
Thank you.
I take this privilege, and it is my honor to propose the vote of thanks this evening. First of all, I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. Rajiv Jha, for his comprehensive overview of the whole process of reviewing the literature. The different purposes of the literature review were illustrated very nicely, along with the famous 5 steps of literature review. The session also included handy tips and tricks for novice researchers. The session focused on how to locate literature and organize references, how to determine the credibility of the material, and also I really appreciated the detailed guidelines which you gave to follow when constructing a literature map, with those examples of the tabular format, the hierarchical design, the circular design, and the bubble graphic and the bucket graphic. All those were really particularly interesting and useful. Thank you so much. An event of this nature wouldn't be possible without the active involvement and cooperation and coordination by all concerned. I would like to thank first and foremost Dr. Shifali Pandya, Professor and Head, Department of Education, University of Mumbai, and her team for being a pillar of support and for their involvement in this endeavor. I would also like to thank Dr. Bhagwan Balani, Principal, Bombay Teachers Training College, and the entire BTTC team for making this event possible and working so hard to coordinate this event. Also would like to thank our young team at the BIAP, Board of Industry Academia Partnerships, for managing and hosting the event, managing the webinar and the digital infrastructure. A big thank you to the team of MEd students. They were available from morning to night, our future teacher, educators, and researchers of tomorrow. Thank you for coordinating the event. Also, thank you to our dear FIBH students for showing up, for being there. They are all in training to be teachers in a post-COVID world, and we were happy to have them with us. I'd like to thank most of all our participants from near and far for being with us through this series, for your interactive participation, your questions, your love and encouragement. Thank you so much. If I missed out on anyone, please do forgive me. We have a session in the morning tomorrow. I'd like the BIP team to please flash the slide. So our upcoming session tomorrow morning, the sixth session by Dr. Sybil Thomas on descriptive research. Dr. Sybil Thomas is Associate Professor, Department of Education. We will now end this program with the national anthem. I request you all to please stand for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Bye everyone. See you tomorrow.